In the 1950s, the United States saw an economic boom that wasn't seen since before World War II and the Great Depression. Most families enjoyed a financial security that produced the first generation of American teenagers with disposable income, creating a bankable popular youth culture catering to adolescents. The birth of rock and roll coincided with the rising pop culture of the 1950s, and teens loved and related to the energetic and rebellious new wave of music. Not surprisingly, for the first time, a slew of films, many that were drive-in features, were made specifically for and about teenagers in stories of varying quality, from the complex to the threadbare, often featuring rock music, sometimes even the musicians themselves. Therefore, young people and popular music were forever linked together, and it's never been more apparent than in movies of this type. It's no coincidence that in the 1980s, after the launch of MTV, a whole new surge of films were made for teenagers about teenage life that had soundtracks incorporating the in vogue music of the era. In the 1980s, however, the genre seemed to be dominated and practically monopolized by the films of writer-director John Hughes. Although most of these films are now considered classics, I find them to be unsatisfying for a number of reasons. It's the combination of the outrageous and sometimes cartoonish humor, the fairy tale handling of social problems and teen issues, the smug, self-satisfying stories often taking place over the course of a single day, and the mere fact that they were oversaturated at the time. I viewed them as an unrealistic reflection of teen life, or at least Hollywood's commercial and safely marketable version. I will say that even though many aspects of these films don't hold up as well under critical scrutiny, I can't help but admire the more poignant and appealing timeless quality they sometimes have. Other teen comedies and dramas of the time rarely veer away from the successful John Hughes formula. However, the few that do attempt to paint a more realistic portrait, deal with serious issues with brutal honesty, try different and/or darker humor, or even attempt to be the antithesis of the successful Hughes formula. Valley Girl from 1983 is one of these glorious exceptions, and it's one of the best high school teen films of the 80s, with an amazing soundtrack to match. It tells the story of Julie and Randy, played by Deborah Foreman and Nicolas Cage, a modern Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers living in LA. The deceptively simple story follows Julie, a popular Valley girl, who breaks up with her desirable and socially acceptable but bad news boyfriend Tommy, much to the dismay of her friends. She then meets Randy, a punk kid from Hollywood, by chance at a party, and the two quickly hit it off and start dating and falling in love, much to the disapproval of Julie's friends, whose eventual peer pressure binds and forces Julie to break up with Randy and take Tommy back. Randy is unaffected and is determined to win Julie back, eventually stealing her back from Tommy at the prom by the end of the film. Today, the film is a nostalgic look back at a particular place and time, capturing specific trends in pop culture. However, it remains timeless with an impossibly irresistible soundtrack that's given the film a deserved longevity. A couple of the performers show up in the film as well, and a relatable, sweet love story. The film elevates itself for a number of other reasons: its realistic and humane treatment of its characters, its mature portrayal of their sex lives, its unpretentious handling of conflict within the story, its sensible and even pacing, and its homage to The Graduate.
Plastics.
The film's portrayal of its characters happens to be one of its most appealing qualities, refusing to render them as simply boldly drawn stereotypes or cliches. For instance, it could have portrayed Julie and her Valley girlfriends only on the surface as airheaded, shallow, dumb, and lacking in good English skills, but actually opens them up as average 80s teen girls with their own desires and their love for shopping, boys, and junk food. As friends, instead of being seen as the cliquish and unsympathetic type as in Heathers or the Plastics in Mean Girls, Valley Girl treats them as real friends who are close, have fun together, and genuinely care for one another, in spite of Julie's friends' disapproval of her dating Randy, creating the central conflict in the story. Similarly, instead of rendering Randy and his punk circle of friends as vacant, destructive anarchists, they contrast the cookie-cutter kids from the Valley who conform with the same popped collars and robotic dancing to pop songs, with their more individual and colorful means of expression set to more passionate rock music. Basically, it shows them as real people who go out and get what they want without caring what others think. Also, Julie's parents break the overbearing nuclear family mold as former hippies who have an unconventional means of parenting. Unlike the John Hughes films, where sexist, chauvinist male conduct is often glorified and rewarded with sexual conquest of desirable female characters, Valley Girl shows it for what it is: hurtful behavior. The film allows its female characters to say no to overbearing male suitors, an aspect that has dated the film well. In fact, the two main characters never consummate their relationship. It never goes beyond attraction and dating. And the smartest choice director Martha Coolidge makes for the movie is letting Cage and Foreman occupy the same frame while the soundtrack swells around them, allowing their on-screen romantic chemistry bounce off the screen and tell their story in scenes without dialogue. It conveys so much without saying anything. One of the scenes in the film that demonstrates how different and satisfying the film is, to me, in comparison to others in the genre, is the scene where Julie has a heart-to-heart with her father about whether to stay with Randy or go back to Tommy. It reminds me of the similar scene in 16 Candles with Molly Ringwald and Paul Dooley. Both scenes are beautifully done, but serve a different purpose for each film. For instance, the scene in 16 Candles plays to the fairy tale aspect of John Hughes films. It resolves conflict and comforts the characters and the audience. By contrast, in Valley Girl, the scene touches upon some basic human truth and common sense, and asks Julie and the audience to think for themselves and make their own decisions. While many films at the time were starting to incorporate flashy music video style pacing and editing, Valley Girl moves along at a uniform pace, which allows us to soak in the fine performances, the scenery, and ironically the music in the film. It also lets us enjoy Frederick Elmes' cinematography, David Lynch's regular director of photography. One of the things I've noticed on repeat viewings of Valley Girl is its sometimes subtle and not so subtle nods to Mike Nichols's masterpiece, The Graduate. It steals one of the famous lines from the film.
Plastics.
Plastics.
One of the best running jokes in the film is the teenage girl and her mother competing for the attention of a young man, mirroring the love triangle in The Graduate between Benjamin, Elaine, and Mrs. Robinson. But especially the final act of the film pays tribute to The Graduate. In The Graduate, Benjamin disrupts Elaine's wedding in a final effort to win her back. Chaos ensues, and eventually the two escape on a bus. Together in the back of the bus, the two characters sit next to each other, disturbingly complacent, creating an unsettling ending unsure of the future of their relationship. In Valley Girl, Randy disrupts Valley High's prom in a final effort to win Julie back before she and Tommy are crowned prom queen and king. Chaos ensues, and eventually Julie and Randy escape together in the back of a limo. The framing in the shot is almost identical to that of The Graduate. Although their future remains unsure, I'd like to think that their future is brighter and happier than Benjamin and Elaine's, because they made the right decision in choosing each other for the right reasons.